Long ago, two races ruled over Earth, humans and monsters. As the humans started exploring the world, two different powers came to power. The first was the robots, mechanized, yellow, muscular warrior monsters. The other was the monsters, flesh, reptilian, muscled, high-strung. The first group, the robots, sought to conquer the world and declared themselves God and the chosen ones. The second group, the monsters, wanted to rule the world themselves. The Lord God tried to bring about a peace in the earth by creating the wood plains to make everyone equal, but one day a monster hijacked a monster combat aircraft. Captain Frosting, Captain Blinded Maven, King Starship, Solar Warship, Chest-Powered Seal, Plundering Anarchy, Gandhi Arsonist, all hands on Superhero Man, and made it fly away into outer space. Now the Lord God commanded that the monsters be made to destroy the robots. In a fit of rage, the robots flew to the monsters' home world to try to kill all of them. Unfortunately, they underestimated the monsters and failed to destroy all of Earth. The Lord God and monsters now have a blood feud. The Lord God saw that his people were devastated and decided to go on vacation. He found a sunset island and set it aside for his people. After a few days, he heard the howling of the monsters and realized he didn't want to be their masters. So he came back to Earth and stomped on the robots' big building, destroyed all of the monsters' toys, and banished them to the netherworld where the monsters could go and play with their toys. God the monster looks down on Earth from his binoculars and sees all of the dust, dirt, destruction, evil, and idiotic behavior that he created. His heart burns with anger, and he decides to make things right. So God the monster makes the humans fall into the pile of earth, the monsters into the pile of remains, the robots into the pile of snakes, and the stars into the pile of doors. Then, in a dark and mystical moment, the Lord God appears in a sort of crazy, shimmering armor, screaming at his own people, "See? I am God, you morons. And I am a lot scarier than you are, whether I'm in this armor or not." And he proceeded to burn the whole thing. After this he was allowed to return to his island. Then he set off to find another planet to make new people out of, with promises of rest, delicious meals, and plenty of tasty food. But things aren't exactly back to normal. Back on Earth, the monsters have returned from the nether world. The robots and stars that were stuck in the pile of remains are gone, as are the stars that were stuck in the pile of doors. It's unclear if they managed to escape, but everyone believes that the monsters were the ones who did it. And from the top of the tall pile of doors, the monsters are strutting their stuff and threatening to jump and eat the humans once and for all. People on Earth are miserable. They feel like they're helpless to do anything, and they've spent their entire lives surviving on this strange, unknown planet that has its own alien inhabitants. There's no hope for a better life, and no hope of escaping the destruction that is coming. And with no hope for anything, they feel their hope for anything else evaporating. People are very afraid. Fortunately, two humans on Earth have decided to fight back against the evil. No one has ever seen anything like these two human rebels. They look pretty normal, but they're extremely powerful and determined. It is known that humans possess little determination, however these two men are both more than capable of fighting. There is not a person in the world that these two men have not sworn to defeat. One man is known to call himself Thomas. The other is known as Archimedes. There are few things that humans do that are as powerful as destroying a bad thing. But to do that, a bad thing needs to have some positive aspects to it. In this case, the monsters were doing many positive things. Like making paper and even having a system for ranking the world's food. And while that's good and all, the good and positive things outweighed the bad by a long shot. So destroying the other things were important. But getting rid of the good things? That was very hard. But it was also extremely necessary. Archimedes was a genius. He was a genius and very determined to defeat the monsters. Thomas was a bit more of a mess, just trying to find a way to make his life better. So what the men needed was some enemy that would be a threat to both of their ambitions. And there was only one option, the creatures that the monsters made. So one day, Archimedes found Thomas practicing his skills in front of the television. Archimedes noticed that Thomas wasn't actually watching the television. He was practicing with a fork. "So what are you doing?" Archimedes asked. "I am going to defeat all the evil," Thomas replied with determination. "Can I get a practice session?" Archimedes asked. "Not today," Thomas replied. "I am training for the battle that is about to come." Then the two men went back to their homes. Thomas was training, but he was training for a long time. Archimedes, however, was sitting at home in a comfortable chair and watching his mother's TV. He was a human and he didn't want to leave, but there was no choice in the matter. The battle was coming and he was needed. The monsters' attacks were vicious and unrelenting. With the dust cleared from the earth, the millions of people who once lived there were few in number. As for the monsters themselves, they were not the kind of creatures that people could reason with or understand. Their simple minds were susceptible to the slightest change in human emotion, and for their kind, that was often the result of just one simple thought. And it happened at one such time. People across the world were panicked and afraid. And they thought the monsters were the cause. There were no signs of any monster activity, but there was panic. People were speaking of monsters and the ghosts that haunted their homes. That's when Thomas and Archimedes found them. The monsters were hungry. They were hungry for something that humans make. What that something was, no one could say, but no matter what it was, the monsters knew it was out there. So what did the monsters do? They kidnapped humans. People who never attacked anyone, but simply existed and didn't hurt anyone. It was the perfect trap. And Thomas and Archimedes were finally ready. They were ready to fight against the monsters. The monster fight was one of the most brutal in history. In the end, the monsters had destroyed an area of 100 square miles in a matter of minutes. All of that land was just gone. But when all was said and done, the men who had gone out and fought against the monsters were the ones standing in the wake of all that destruction. They were the men who saved the world from the disaster. It was in those aftermaths that the monsters continued their activities. They knew that humans would be drawn out into the open, and that once in the open, it was their turn to unleash their most vile violence. So they did. They released their Messiah. They made people believe that their Messiah could take away all the pain that they were feeling. They made them believe that their Messiah could change their lives. They made people think that their lives were not yet as bad as the lives of the monsters. They made people think that the monsters were destroying the world. And when all the monsters were gone and only humans remained, the monsters went about their wicked business as normal. There were no more stories of monstrous activity. There were no more stories of new monsters. The monsters were gone. And yet, there were no more monsters. Archimedes just sat in his chair, thinking about what had happened. He was a simple man. He wanted to think about things that were simpler than monsters. He wanted to think about the future. The future was now. The monsters were dead, and the world was now open. This is a good thing, Archimedes thought to himself. This will be a better world now. We have gained something. We can take all of that into our future. And we can use that to build something better than the monsters ever could. I will be the first to go out in this world. I will put something right. I will be the change I see in the world. And that's when Archimedes walked out into the sunlight, a ray of light breaking across his face, and he held up his hands in the universal sign for peace. "Peace be with you," Archimedes said, "and peace will last." And that is the story of how the first star ended.